So I'd like to introduce the second speaker. Please welcome Mr. Marumoto. Please welcome. So, Mr. Marumoto initially joined the navigation safety of IMO in 1997 as an associate professional officer seconded by the government of Japan for 3 years. He returned back to the Japan Coastguard in various functions, in particular safety of navigation and search and rescue, which includes the commanding officer and master of 2 Coastguard patrol vessels. He recruited back to the IMO Maritime Safety Division in 2010, and as a consequence, he gave up the uniform. So, Maruno-san, floor is yours.
Thank you, Captain Kawai. Excellencies, dignitaries, distinguished participants, 皆さんこんばんは. From London to those who are connecting from Japan and elsewhere around the world, thank you for the invitation. I'm honored and privileged to be able to speak in front of you today. I'd like to first congratulate Japan Marine Safety Association, as well as Nippon Zaidan Foundation, for organizing this unique and forward-looking event for Coast Guard, with a focus of emerging challenges having to deal with vessels with no humans on board. Having Coast Guard background myself, I can only admire and applaud this excellent idea to specifically address the operational challenges that the Coast Guard will inevitably face when humans start disappearing from the scene at sea in the future, at least from some of the vessels that we always took it granted that they are piloted under the command of a human on board. And having heard numerous mass-related activities, expos, and conferences, and the project presentations such as those that we have seen just now, technological development from around all over the world, this is one of the kind that I myself have not heard of at the international level, at least, focusing the challenges that the Coast Guard will face in their inability to interact with humans on scene when they need to. That said, I was asked to provide some updates on the development of MARS at the IMO level, where 175 member states from all over the world bring their own views, often conflicting each other. And I want to start by saying, by observing, it looks quite challenging. IMO, as a UN body responsible for the development of shipping-related rules and regulations applicable globally, obviously plays the key role to provide the leadership on this subject. IMO aims to integrate new and advancing technologies in its regulatory framework, balancing benefits derived from new technologies against safety and security concerns, the impact on the environment and on international trade facilitation, the potential cost to the industry, and the impact on personnel, both on board or ashore. IMO wants to ensure that regulatory framework for MARS keeps pace with technological developments that are rapidly evolving. From this standing, IMO has first undertaken recently completed a regulatory scoping exercise on MARS that was designed to assess existing IMO instruments to see how they might apply to ships with varying degrees of automation And the result can be found in MSc Circular 1638 if you are interested and if you have not seen it. The similar scoping exercise had been conducted and completed by legal and facilitation committees within their own competence. In parallel, in order to provide guidance at the global scale, how the trials should be safely conducted, the Maritime Safety Committee has approved an interim guidelines for MARS trials, and this is in MSc Circular 1604, just for your information. MSc last year commenced work on development of goal-based non-mandatory IMO instrument regulating the operation of MARS. Understandably, due to diverging views, this work is currently being undertaken in a cautious manner. The decision was made, first, to agree on the roadmap before embarking on the development of the code itself, while agreeing on the scope to cover in global context is something that required extensive diplomacy and negotiations. One thing that seemed easy was to agree to place an ambitious target to complete this work. This is a reflection of how member states are enthusiastic and ambitious. The roadmap envisages the completion of the code with a view to adoption next year in 2024. Based on the experience gained in the application of the non-mandatory MARS code, a new mandatory, I repeat, mandatory MARS code will be developed, which is envisaged to enter into force in 2028 already. And roadmap says adoption by MSc 110 session in 2025, which sounds quite ambitious. In-depth thematic technical works, usually undertaken at the subcommittee level at the IMO, under the oversight of the Maritime Safety Committee, have not yet taken place. And again, this is because the policy formulation for maritime safety, for example, rests within the competence of the parent body, that is MSC, or Maritime Safety Committee. And once this is determined and goals set, only then the work to develop detailed technical work would come down to the subcommittee level, which I'm deeply involved. In particular, for safety of navigation, collision avoidance, and search and rescue, making us even busier than we already are. The decision rests within the IMO membership, and I personally am looking forward to assisting them when and if time comes. And talking on the subject on discussion, interestingly enough, one of the challenges that yet to be resolved and in a way will likely to remain as a key issue is the formulation of common understanding on what that thing means or what constitutes MARS. For the purpose of regulatory scoping exercise, the MARS definition was developed to mean that a ship which, to a varying degree, can operate independent of human interaction. Again, this is for the purpose of regulatory scoping exercise in a wider context. And of course, depending on what you are talking about, in what context, the subject of its definition may need to be adjusted or altered to bring the most suitable context. Even in IMO key instrument, subject is called differently. In collision regulation, based under the international treaty, for the purpose of collision avoidance, the term vessel is used to bring wider context than ships. While it is a ship in most of the maritime treaties, including SOLAS, mind you that in COLREG, the term vessel also includes even seaplanes when they are on surface. Here, noting this unique event, specifically addressing the Coast Guard challenges in relation to the mast, I'd like to touch upon some examples of challenges to set the scene as an opener for the coming 2 days. For this purpose, I would emphasize that what I'm speaking here is not necessarily the official view of the IMO. I'm speaking me as an individual. When it comes to Coast Guard challenges with no humans on board, it may make things easier to use the term unmanned ships. The Coast Guard operations becomes an issue when a human is not available on board, and it does not seem to matter if that object, which I call a ship, which I call a vessel, navigate with what degree of autonomy. For Coast Guard operations, it still remains that there may be no helping hands of humans on rescue scene, or in hostile environment, no suspect to be detained or arrested in crime scene. Whatever the Coast Guard functions the state would like to exercise as the subject of Coast Guard operations, they seem to be predominantly based on human activities. Well, it is a welcoming move, at least for some, for whatever the reason of economy or another, to utilize available new technology to replace seafarers in future. One of the biggest challenges for Coast Guard when ships start losing humans on board is that in maritime tradition, when ships enjoy freedom of navigation, often remote from shore, safety has always been based on the principle of mutual assistance. Here is a saying: when persons are in distress at sea, the master of the ship is bound to proceed with all speed to their assistance. And this customary principle is codified in SOLAS and UNCLOS treaties. Well, what assistance can vessel without human provide upon successful search to find a lost ship in distress? Sophisticated machines without human may be able to do some better job than human to locate ships or life raft or even person lost at sea. But what these machines can do to rescue or recover persons in distress. Can I explore the picture? By obligation, SOLAS ships are fully equipped with life-saving appliances, including recovery devices from water for human use. The exception or expectation for Coast Guard far away from the scene might be that this ship will act as an on-scene SAR coordinator and recover whoever found in distress, including the recovery of unconscious survivors from the water safely on board. But in reality, you might have a floating platform, but what that thing can do, it will become an issue for SAR authorities when a ship in the vicinity proceeds to rescue at full speed, only to find that there's no helping hand available. On-scene SAR coordinator is no longer on scene. These pose significant challenges for rescue coordination, which are typically based ashore. And some of the existing regulations are just not compatible rescuing persons from the water, according to regulatory scoping exercise that cannot just be accommodated by amending existing instruments or applying equivalencies. Similar challenges will be faced in terms of interdiction and boarding operations The Coast Guard want to detain or arrest a person on scene rather than just confiscating a property. And don't forget, boarding operations involve climbing up the flight of long ladders or gangways which might no longer become available if you are not careful enough. In the current age, when human navigators on board, we are already experiencing huge challenges for unsafe pilot transfer arrangement when humans are there to lower the ladder and adjust the speed for you. If the availability of such ladders become optional or omitted by the favorite course called exemption, the Coast Guard will only be able to board a ship from helicopters. It will probably not happen, but you may wish to keep an eye at an operating theater, for you could change depending on the degree of exemptions to be given for future masts at the IMO. And in order to allow the masts without human to freely navigate open waters, soon a number of exemptions will be developed when the technology cannot bring solutions. In other words, relaxation of stringent measures designed only to have Coast Guard on ships may phase out. But to what extent the Coast Guard is prepared to give away what they used to enjoy in the past? This will require extensive discussions among yourself, the Coast Guard professionals. Indeed, coastal states having rights and obligations under the established customary law, these customs are solely based on human interactions, on the natural assumption that within a ship, there's always a human master and a crew on board. Time for the change soon to come. And it is becoming more and more important for the Coast Guard to be actively involved in IMO discussions. Otherwise, someone else could make a shocking decision with or without your knowledge, making future Coast Guard operations even more difficult and dangerous. And having seen the list of distinguished panelists today and tomorrow, I have no doubt that this event will bring a great success. And I hope this event will bring a new chapter for the future consideration of the Coast Guard operational challenges. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Marumo-san, for the perspective from IMO. Maybe he concluded the whole these two days seminars.